Alrighty, we're gonna go ahead and get started in just a minute. Hopefully everyone is having a great day and enjoying Career Fest so far. Okay, it is 2 o'clock, so we'll get started. Hi everyone, my name is Liz. I'm the Internship Programs Advisor here at the USC Career Center, and I'm going to be moderating today's panel. So welcome to Inside Scoop, Career Fair Tips from Recruiters. I have here with you all three recruiters from different organizations. So if I could have each of you just briefly introduce yourself and who you're representing, starting with you, Raleigh.
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Raleigh Harris. I'm the HR coordinator at Cosm. We power live immersive experiences for full range of content. Um, and what was the second part of that question, Liz? Sorry.
You got it all.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, happy to be here and talk to you guys.
Hi,
Sherry, do you want to introduce yourself?
absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry Momo. I'm a program coordinator for Justice Corps Los Angeles. Our program is an internship and fellowship that places members in courthouses across the county.
Thank you, Sherry. And Kim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Donovan. I am the senior partner of talent acquisition programs at DirecTV, and I have responsibility for end-to-end internship program management. So happy to be here. And I was supposed to be there earlier this week, but Winter Storm Fern kept me based in the Midwest. But so I'm glad this was on the book. So at least had an opportunity to engage this week.
Thank you, Kim. And we're just happy you're warm and safe. So,
I'm not warm, but I'm safe.
well, at least you're safe. That's all we're happy
Mm.
for. Lauren, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Opkenorth. I'm the Associate Director of Internship Engagement here at the USC Career Center. I work with Liz, and I will be on the back end of things. So I wanted to come on real quickly to just say who I was. And if you do have other questions, I will be managing the chat while our guests share a little bit of their expertise.
Thank you, Lauren. And then if you do have questions, we'll have time at the end, but please put them in the Q&A for our panelists to answer them later. So to kick us off, we have some upcoming recruitment fairs next week. Each of our recruiters here have been to them. We have the Internship Expo and the Spring Career Fair. What are some things students can do to be prepared for next week? Raleigh, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I'll cover just a couple topics and then I'll pass it to the other speakers. But as somebody who graduated college just recently in 2024, something that really helped me was one, look at the map of the career fair if possible, or just identify companies that will be there. Pick a couple that you think are going to be the best for you, that you might have the most interest in, and kind of start to schedule bouncing around those tables. Second thing for you is going to be practicing your interpersonal conversation skills. I think that a really big part of having those conversations and making your name stick is being able to be a personality that the recruiter is excited to meet. Far too often I meet folks who might be super shy, and it actually ends up hurting them sometimes because even though they might be super qualified, they just might not be somebody who I could see being an energetic character as part of my organization here at Cosm. So something I highly recommend you guys do is just practice, 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 and put your best foot forward when talking to recruiters at these kinds of fairs. I'll pass it off to the next person.
And because I agree with you, I think knowing who's there and knowing what they have available are probably the two most important things. To add to what Raleigh said is you need to be able to sell yourself in the roles that the company has posted. So make sure you're looking at the details of those roles. You're comparing those required skills to what your skills and what's on your resume. And as part of your elevator pitch, tie those together. And because you want the recruiters to be able to see you in that role as you see yourself in that role too.
And I would just add for my program, which is an internship and fellowship, we have a huge emphasis on professional development for early professionals. So it's always helpful to hear where you are in your career exploration and development, just out of our own curiosity to see if it makes sense for you to join this program. Some people, it doesn't make sense for them to do an internship after they've had years of experience working somewhere, and for other people it makes perfect sense. So don't ever be shy to say, like, I'm really confused about this, I'm interested in this and that. I want to learn more about blah, blah, blah. And another thing too, this was actually, we had a career coach come and speak to our members recently, and she gave this really great tidbit of advice that kind of bouncing off both of my co-speakers here. If you are nervous, it makes sense to start at a couple of booths or tables that you might not be interested in working with or in, just to get some experience practicing that elevator pitch and just to get your nerves out and see what it's like to talk to a recruiter, especially if you've never done it before. So by the time you come to CASM or DirecTV or Justice Square LA's table, you're ready and are showing that personality that Raleigh was talking about.
I like that advice. I don't think I've heard that before, like starting with the ones that you're like not as interested in. We do recommend to students to make a list of organizations that like you're like really interested in, maybe some that are like medium that maybe you've never heard of, right? To kind of have variety in your lists. And you kind of all touched a little bit on this, but I want to dive deeper into the research part. So we recommend to students that they should research organizations before approaching a table, right? So what should they be researching about organizations to stand out? And what have students told you all that made them stand out to you as recruiters at the tables?
Yeah, I mean, I think a common misconception is that when you go to a career fair, that all the responsibilities on the recruiter to kind of, give you the information about what a company does. I think something that is super critical in being prepared for these kinds of fairs is, whether it's a company you're not that interested in or someone who you are interested in, is looking at their website and really starting to explore really everything that's in there. Again, for example, myself, I'm not that skilled in design, but knowing how design might work at COSM can be helpful when you start to have conversations with recruiters and say, hey, here's what I know about your company, and start to talk down the road leading up to what you want to work in. Something that a student has really told me about my company that made them stand out was when they approached us and said, I know that you guys are working on this new project. I'm really interested in jumping in on this new project because XYZ that I have experience in, or I'm just interested in. And being able to feel like they're caught up with what you're doing and not feel like you have to backtrack every time with a new person to kind of catch them up to speed, is something that really can set someone apart from the others.
One thing that I like to see is just having a baseline of what our mission is. If you don't have every single detail about our program, it's totally fine, but having some, because believe it or not, these career fairs can be a little exhausting. So giving the same information over and over and over again can be really hard and monotonous. So it's fun when someone comes to the table and they have a sense of what the program is. And instead they have like very specific questions about maybe our reach or our data. And maybe there is a piece of information they couldn't find online and they want to come and talk to me about that. Those people always stand out if they come to the table with a question. And then another thing that's really helpful is if you've already applied to the program, just coming by and saying, hi, like I'm applying to this program or I'm applying again, and I just wanted to introduce myself since you're here. With Justice Square LA, the recruiters are also the people who will be doing the interviews for you. So and when I'm at USC next month, the students that I see at the table and come and tell me I already applied, I will very likely be the person who interviews them as well. So, and I have a good memory. That's what I always tell people. So it's really nice to see them again during our interviews, and we can talk about what they've learned about the program since coming to the career fair.
In both Raleigh and Sherry hit on really key points. And Liz, I don't know if this is okay or not, but I wouldn't add anything to what they said to do, but I would like to add on what you should not do, if that's okay. Don't come to the table and say, what do you have? What do you have to offer? Right? That for me is the biggest turnoff, because as Sherry said, it's exhausting. It's very tiresome and having to repeat that. So having someone who knows who knows what's available, who knows the mission and vision and the values of the company, who knows what you're involved in the industry, and just tie that into your conversation as we talked about earlier. But don't it's not us trying to sell you. Really, it's you selling yourself, and it's a joint relationship. It's with both sides of it. So have at least a little bit of knowledge and be able to communicate about it.
Yeah, I love this advice from all of you about how to be prepared and really standing out as you approach the table, already knowing the roles and already knowing all of these things. And to echo what you said, Sherry, we do tell students like, even though you've applied, like putting a face to the name, like really makes a difference. Because you remember, right? You remember the application, you remember where you met them. So engaging in these different forms really does make an impact on your application. Um, and kind of speaking more about like, being at the table, we tell students to often prepare an elevator pitch, right? Um, can you tell us what are some things that you like to hear in an elevator pitch? And kind of like as a follow-up to that, a common question we get is how long should it be? So how long is too long for you all?
Mhm. I'll start on this one. So 45, 30 to 45, yeah, 30 to 60 seconds, right? I mean, it's no more than a minute. And I feel like you're probably going to hear the same things over and over again as to what's, what you should do, but you have to tell the story of how you would be a fit for that role. So tying in your knowledge of the company, how that aligns with what you're doing or studying at school, and maybe one example of how you have demonstrated a skill or an experience that the job posting is looking for, and then tying it up at the end with why you would be a good candidate for that role. The whole focus of the elevator pitch is to let them see you in a light that says, "Oh, I can see you in this role," or "Oh, yeah, you've got the right skill set." And it demonstrates research, and it demonstrates that you have a strong, strong interest. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, I totally agree with that 30 to 60 seconds. I think that if you have more to say about yourself that goes beyond that, maybe take some time and provide a pause, allow the recruiter to respond to you before launching into maybe that second act of what you want to talk about. For example, if you want to dedicate 45 seconds to talking about your academic career or like things you're involved in at school, allow the recruiter to bounce off of that. And then you could launch into maybe some more professional stuff you've done. And that could even help progress that conversation further. Um, you know, Something else I like to hear a lot as well, and um, you guys talked about knowing the company is knowing yourself, knowing what you're good at and being able to leverage that into that 45, 60 seconds to really make yourself look as shiny as possible. But also, human at the same time, not necessarily I'm the best at this, I'm the best at this, but say I really enjoy doing this. I am learning to do this. Stuff that makes it sound like you're doing upward growth instead of just being absolutely perfect.
I really like what was shared already. I would add on that a good way to think of your elevator pitch is like if you were assigned a very concise version of that first question they always ask during an interview, why do you want to work here? Or tell us about yourself. However you would answer that question, think about the highlights from that you'd want to share if you got just one chance in 30 seconds to meet someone. I also really like, kind of like I mentioned before, when people have questions, like, hey, I have this very specific experience. I think it's applicable to what you all are doing. Is it actually? Because I think just like was said, it leads into like me having to ask you questions and me having to follow up and giving you the chance to share a little bit more about yourself. And then just like the last question you asked, Liz, I think it's so important to research the organizations that you want to work for or interested in learning more about so you can approach them with a relevant elevator pitch. I don't think like what you would share between the three of us here as recruiters would be the same to keep us to have us keep you in mind as a candidate for whatever role you might be applying for. And I think that's okay. It's good, right? That there are so many diverse recruiters coming to USC for these career fairs, but be intentional about where you're going. I always tell our members in the program, if you want a job, you should act like you really want it. And so do all of the things that you would do when you're like, I really want to work at COSM, or I really want to work at DirecTV. The same way you probably did when applying to USC, you took the time, talked to people, gathered advice, came to things like this, and showed up as prepared as you could be for the very specific opportunity presented to you.
I like that. Lauren, I think we should put that somewhere. If you want a job, you should act like you really want it. Thank you all for like the really great advice on the elevator pitches. So something else, again, thinking about like at the table, we tell students is dress to impress at the recruitment fairs. How do you recommend for students to dress for career fairs, and does the way they dress impact your impression of them? That's a very common question we get as well.
I would say yes. I would say yes. I'm sorry, Sherry. I would say yes. It does. It does impact opinion to a degree. Now, we are a remote first company. So, I mean, most people that I work with have the business mullet where, you know, your business on the top and party on the bottom and nobody knows the difference. But if you come and you look disheveled and you don't look like you're put together, or you it doesn't even look like you had an opportunity to comb your hair, you know, that that translates into, you know, timeliness, punctuality, dependability, accountability. So it's important to make sure you at least look buttoned up. In my opinion, you don't have to have a suit on, right? You don't have to have heels on, but you do have to be representing yourself professionally, which means your appearance is professional as well, meaning, you know, you're not wrinkled, you don't have stains on your shirt, right? You're cleaned up. So yes, it makes it changes my perspective or perception when I see that.
I think this question is so personal to different recruiters, and everyone would have a different answers. Even within Justice Corps, I'm sure all of the staff members would have a different preference. For me, I think I'm coming to a college campus, and these are college students. I don't know what they do or do not have access to. So I take a similar approach to Kim, where it's like, I hope you won't show up in like pajamas and you didn't brush your hair. But I won't hold it against you if you're wearing jeans and a nice t-shirt, or even jeans and a plain t-shirt, but maybe you have your resumes printed out and you did a lot of research at the table. You should look presentable. And I think one of the reasons why that's so important is because professionalism is a skill that's developed over time. So with early professionals, like people who just graduated from undergrad or are looking for their first internship, there is always going to be a little bit of concern about, can this person maintain a level of professionalism in the workspace? When you're early in your career, the expectations are a little different. But we want to know, okay, they have a baseline of that, something that they learned at USC taught them that they know to show up to places on time, just echoing what Kim said, on time and looking presentable enough. But at the same time, it's like I'm going to college campus. I know some people are stopping by in between classes, and maybe not everyone owns a blazer yet. So it's a bit of a balance.
Yeah, I really like what both of you guys just said there. Something that actually kind of stuck with me was what you said, Kim, about how you present yourself is a reflection of your dependability and your kind of professionalism and accountability. I completely agree with that. And I also agree with Sherry, where she's like, you know, maybe you don't need to come, you know, dressed to the nines to a career fair. I think basic guidelines I would provide for y'all are minimal logos, you know, minimal wrinkles, minimal stains, um, and something that you might wear to visit your grandparents, right? It doesn't have to be business formal, but I always enjoy when someone wears like maybe a sweater, yeah, jeans, maybe some just like khakis, something that says, hey, I'm, you know, still in college. I'm a human just like you. I'm not going to work today, but I also want to impress you and show to you that I can clean up and and be semi-professional in this moment. And so whether you are someone who likes to come in a suit for a very formal job, depending on the company, or somebody who is maybe coming to a less formal table like myself, Cosm is a very casual dressed company. We always appreciate, regardless of the company or the industry, we always appreciate somebody who looks like they want to at least impress the person they're talking to.
Liz, can I add something to what was just shared? I'm thinking about what you both said, and a tip that comes to mind is just like imagine if the three of us were very disheveled with like our backgrounds a mess. You would not want to apply to our companies, or you wouldn't want to come to our tables if we were like just I don't know in ripped shorts and a stained, tattered T-shirt. So kind of apply that same idea to yourself. Like if you wouldn't apply for a company where someone is showing up the way that you're dressed, maybe that's a good sign to change. And the same is true for the elevator pitch too. I really like the emphasis on just being human. If we were sitting here very robotic and reading off all of our answers off the screen and like not engaging with each other, you probably wouldn't want to apply to our program. So when you come to the tables, feel free to be human with us as we plan to be with you.
And something else I'll throw in there, and just one more bit here is on top of the way you dress, like your whole everything is part of your presentation. I would practice just smiling while talking. It doesn't have to be a huge beaming smile, but just something that makes the recruiter feel like you are enjoying the conversation, right? It goes a long way to be smiling, as opposed to, frowning or flat-faced when you're talking to somebody new.
Add to that, look them in the eye, right? When you're talking to them, look them in the eye. Don't look down, don't look behind them. The engagement piece of it is so important.
I love all of this advice. I like what you said, Rally, about dressing like you would to your grandma's, right? Like this is still a first impression. You want to be clean, wrinkle-free, right? And then I love the engagement piece, right? Eye contact, nodding, right? You do want to look interested in the organization, right? Um, and yeah, like just to echo what Sherry said about like obviously this would be a bad impression of our panelists if they were all very disheveled right now, right? You would get a bad impression of the organization too. So remember, you're representing yourself. It's the first impression, and it does make an impact. So I appreciate you all sharing your tips on engagement and dressing and all of that. I also just want to shout out Lauren's in the chat. She put in the JCPenney Suit Up event for you all to see more ways to access some professional clothing as well as our guide for dressing for success. So click on those links if you want more information for some guidance. And again, just kind of staying with this theme of being at the table with the students. Another common question we get from students is resumes, right? Because they often hand you their resumes. So what are some top things that you all look for in a resume when you meet students at the recruitment fairs? Sherry, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I think, well, it's two things. When people hand me a resume at a recruitment fair, I usually tell them to keep it. Not because it's not good advice to have your resume prepared, but because we request resumes when you apply, it's not optional. And you need to apply to be part of our program. So it's not the case that we would reach out to you based off of like the information you submitted on your resume. We would only reach out to you if you went through the whole application process, which includes submitting your resume. So don't take any offense if someone says, oh, you can keep your resume. We know it's hard to print on campus. So, but when we are reviewing resumes, one thing that I feel like is really underrated that we look for is if the resume is formatted correctly and professionally. I say this because a lot of people get insecure about like their lack of experience to put on a resume. And then, Canva and like Adobe, these are widely available tools. So sometimes people get really creative and do all different types of things with their resumes. But I feel like having a well formatted resume shows me at least like, okay, they talked to someone, they went to the Career Center, they talked to an alum in the program, they put a little bit of effort into presenting this information in the correct way, because there is a correct way to format a business resume. specifically for Justice Corps, something that's always really sad to me is when people discount their experience because they think, oh, it's not professional enough or it's not impressive enough. But we're looking for any interaction with other people. So, yes, some people like they interned for a law firm and they were doing this really amazing cool thing in DC, and some people were working at Starbucks and had to de-escalate a lot of angry people very early in the morning. And that experience is just as valuable as the former that I shared to us, at least. So just try not to discount yourself and know that I'm sure you have a lot of resources at USC that can help turn any experience and or can help highlight the skills of any experience on the resume.
I really like that point of how you give back the resume. I think something that I experienced a lot when I was going to career fairs was the disheartening experience of handing someone a resume and then walking away. It felt like I was turning in a ballot that wasn't going to get counted, right, in a vote. Something I would really recommend for you guys to do is still bring resumes with you to career fair. And I love the point about formatting. That is so important. And what I would do when you talk to a recruiter is say, can I give this to you to read while I'm talking to you? So that way it says to them, I want you to be able to read my resume while we're talking because some people are just better learners that way when they are able to read and hear. And it doesn't have to be laminated, right? It's not a restaurant menu, but at the same time, it's a helpful tool to analyze and digest information in a way that could be actually unique to you guys as opposed to other individuals who might just say, "Hi, this is me. Here's my resume. Goodbye." Right? It almost puts a pause on the whole conversation that slows down the speed of things to give you more of a personal moment with the recruiter.
I like that a lot. We do collect them, but we're asked, right? Most students ask, "Are you collecting resumes?" And we do. And I we write on them, we take notes, but we don't have to because very similar to Sherry, we require an application with a resume as well. So what we don't want to do is people feel like they're just wasting money, right, and throwing paper away. But I like to read, Raleigh, when I'm talking to the students. I like to be able to look and assess and say, this is who they are, this is what they're studying, this is where they go to school, and these are their technical skills. Those are the first things I look for. So the format that the Career Center provides is so important because it really does align. I love the creativity that Canva allows and things, but what I don't like to have to do is like, okay, here's their name, and then here's where their technical skills are, and where is their education. And so being really strategic and following that layout is so important because it makes it a lot easier on us and allows us to pay more attention to you during the conversation, and I'm not looking for things and I'm not hearing what you're saying.
Yeah. I also want to just kind of add on to what you were saying, Cam, about like, Canva's very pretty, but I like to think about it like reading a book, right? We kind of naturally, our eyes go to where they're supposed to go. As recruiters, I'm sure your eyes kind of naturally do that with resumes too. And you don't want to make it more difficult for the recruiters to read a resume if their eyes are naturally going to certain places. So that's why we have sort of a standard format we recommend, rather than the very pretty ones from the templates. I also, again, just want to shout out Lauren's link in the chat for you all to see our resume guides for you all. And then kind of staying again within this at the table, what sort of questions should students be asking you at the table?
I think a big one is why do you like X company? Um, it puts the recruiter on their heels a little bit, right? It stops being an offensive battle and it starts being more of a give and take a little bit. So it gives you guys as students a moment of respite to stop having to worry about spinning the wheels of talking about yourself. And you actually get to learn a little bit about the organization and actually do some assessment for yourself, right? If you guys ask me, what do you like about COSM? And I said something to you like, man, I really love that we work 7 days a week. We don't. But if I said that to you, you might say to yourself, okay, maybe this just isn't the place for me. But if I said to you, something I really love about COSM is the ability to have upward mobility and go from an intern to a full-time employee, which is something I did, right? That might signal to you, okay, this is somewhere I want to, stay as an applicant to and continue working with.
Yeah, I like that being able to understand the recruiter's perspective on why they are happy because recruiters are representing the company. So you know there's going to be some part of the company that they find value in or see value in or haven't had a great experience. Um, Another way to another question to ask about that similarly is what would you how would you define your biggest success at DirecTV? What put you in this role? Keeping it more about, people love to talk about themselves. And so allowing the recruiter an opportunity to talk about themselves. And it does, I agree with Raleigh, it does give you a break from having to, it lets you take a breath.
I would echo what was said already. It's so fun when you can like someone comes to the table and they change things up for you because it can be very routine at a recruitment fair. Um, I also think like trust your own sense of curiosity, come to the recruitment fairs well rested and like ready to listen and learn. And if something that a recruiter shares with you sparks your interest, feel free to ask more about that. So our program is focused on like serving people in Los Angeles. You can ask us how many people you serve, how many languages do you help them in, just wherever your curiosity takes you, so we can have a conversation at the table. Because honestly, it's fun for us, to not have to share so much about our program because you're well researched, and now you can just be curious and ask us a question that we might not have heard before.
And just to kind of add on to that, this would be where that research really comes into play, right? Where like you've clearly done your research, you know what the program is about, but you were curious about the extra part that you couldn't find. And that's where that curiosity really makes you stand out. And as we kind of get up to the final few questions I have, I just want to remind the audience that if you do have questions, there will be time at the end, but please put them in the Q&A, and then I will ask them for you for our recruiters. Now kind of pivoting to, I guess, more like negative impressions. So Kim, you kind of talked about this earlier, but I want to open it up to the other panelists as well. But what are some things that students should avoid doing when attending a career fair? And kind of as a part two to that, has a student ever done something that you felt immediately gave you a negative impression?
I can. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, since we are a service program, which you would know because you researched Justice Corps before the career fair, it's really important to be mindful of how you talk about the people that we serve. So you might unintentionally say something a little degrading about the types of people who need the type of help that we offer. So just be mindful of that when you come to the table. And then we have some swag to give out, and sometimes people will like come to, the first thing they do is grab something, they don't introduce themselves. That it just gets under my skin a little bit. And then Kim shared a lot of everyone shared a lot of really great things like smile, act interested, make eye contact, be present. All of that's really helpful too.
I was going to jump in with you said just think about a negative time. Something that came to mind that made me just laugh right out the blue. Was I was doing a speaker series at Loyola Marymount, and again, lots of amazing talented students there as well as you guys. But somebody came up to me and was like a little bit. It felt like they were talking down to me a little bit, where they said, your causing your company could be really cool. I I think this is an okay company. Like I see you guys maybe going far. Like I think steering away from comments that could be seen as derogatory about a company is a big thing to do, right? Always be complimentary and curious. Curious is the way you should go instead of assertive. Um, but something else too is if you're nervous about the small things like your handshake or something like that, don't worry about that. That is not something that's going to be a make or break for you. And something else that can be kind of frustrating is when individuals think they might be too cool for a name tag. You are never too cool for a name tag. It is so, so, so helpful when I'm talking to you and I can look down and just say, okay, that's their name. That's how I remember. Because, we as recruiters at these kinds of events talk to hundreds of people. And so sometimes it's easy for names to get jumbled. And so when we're able to visually match the name to the face, it can be super duper helpful for us.
Yeah.
Emma wanted to give you a chance to kind of expand on the
And I'm
question.
going to add one thing, Liz. um, it, read the room, read the space, right? And because I am always one who am like forever getting the line in order, right? The line it's blocking the walkway on, sorry, line, line starts here. When you get to a company and you look around, and if you see a line of people, go stand at the end of it. Don't don't park yourself right in the middle, because then we're going to have to stop talking with someone and redirect someone to a different part of the space. And so just be situationally aware, is probably the best way to put that for me.
Yeah, I love all of this advice. And again, Riley, I think you shared a really interesting story of someone kind of talking down about the company, but also just make sure you know the company you're talking to, right? I know a friend who works for a company owned by Boeing actually. But someone walked up to his company saying, "Hey, I love Boeing," and he's like, "I don't work for Boeing. I work for Millennium. It's owned by Boeing." So again, just knowing who you're actually talking to when you walk up to the tables, which is where that research comes in, right? Okay, so we do have some time for questions from our students, so I want to make sure to answer some of those for them in the Q&A. So kind of circling back to elevator pitches, one of our students asked, what advice would you give on delivering a strong elevator pitch when speaking with industry professionals? And they asked if they have any suggested like format for the elevator pitch in terms of like what should be in it.
Like I mentioned before, I'm sure it'll be a little different depending on the companies that you go to. So it's almost like when you're writing a personal statement, it's nice to have like a core and then have little tidbits that you can adjust depending on who you're speaking to. For me, it's really important to know like obviously your name, what year in school you are, because that changes the eligibility for any of our programs, what you're interested in, and where you are in your like career journey, what you're like looking at, if you have any questions, if anything has been really difficult for you, and what you're interested or passionate in. I really like the example given before too of just like ending with a skill that you're proud of in a way you've demonstrated that.
Yeah, I think about it. Oh, sorry. I think about it like when you are learning to write a paragraph for the first time, and you might start highlighting different lines of that paragraph and say, okay, here's like my hook, here's my conclusion, and here's like the bread and potatoes, the meat. Um, I think just formatting out and writing out an elevator pitch for yourself, separate from actually like speaking it into existence, is something that's super helpful. And then when you have a moment to yourself, whether that's in your room, in with a friend, out and about, it's great to just like practice reading it, and eventually you'll be able to just kind of say it off the cuff and be able to describe yourself super fluidly without stuttering or missing details that you might want to make sure you include.
Mhm. The more you say it, the more it comes organically. So I like that practicing tip for sure. I think we may have lost Kim, but that's okay. Hopefully she can join us again. Another question we had from the audience is when you see experienced professionals transition into new industries, what typically differentiates the candidates who successfully convert conversations into interviews from those who don't? So I'll copy and paste that in the chat for you all. Oh, Kim joined us again. Perfect. Hi, Kim. Welcome back.
Yeah, so is the question geared more towards what converts a conversation into an interview?
That's my interpretation of it. Lauren, do you feel like, yeah, that I would answer it that way too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, naturally, I don't know if there's been a time for myself at least where we've kind of just streamlined you, but I think a conversation can be super helpful where it's hard to say. I mean, if our conversation was gripping, and I felt like you were a great eligible candidate, I might make a note and just say like first name, last name. I'll think about you, and then when you do apply and that name filters through, it's like, oh, okay, okay, cool, and then you might make a little asterisk next to them. Um, I think that helps a lot, but I don't know, I might pass it to the other panelists if they have some advice on this.
I think you answering this question is like it's gotten my wheels turning. And I think that just like being if the question is if we meet at a career fair and we have a conversation, what can you say during that conversation to make it likely that when I see your application, you're interviewed? I think just being professional, nice, normal, like just how you would talk to, like I said before, you need to act like you want a role if you want a role. So present yourself well, but also have some curiosity, come with some questions, show a lot of interest. I think that alone will set you apart from a lot of people who come to career fairs because a lot of people don't go to sessions like this and know how to like present themselves to recruiters. So knowing that we're interested in hearing a little bit more about you and being well researched, it might help us remember your name when we're filtering through applications and remember the level of interest you showed when we met you in person in February. So.
Yeah, and don't feel like super discouraged if you have a bad conversation. Career fairs are a lot like speed dating, where you're just going around and you're doing your best to talk about yourself and your experience. And, whether it's your first choice or your fifth choice, the role you end up landing when you graduate, it's a stepping stone to a greater achievement and greater career path, right? So don't think that, this first career fair, this first conversation you have is end all be all because it's not. You are just getting started in your careers, and the sooner that you guys practice and improve, the better you'll be. But don't worry so much about converting every single conversation into an interview down the line.
Yeah, thank you both. And I know a few of you shared like that you require an application, right, in addition to coming to the table. So one of the students asked, can you share how you can make that application stand out or remind them that, or remind you all that you've met before? If anyone wants to speak on that.
I think for it to be for you to stand out, you have to make sure that your resume reflects the job that you're applying for. So you should never just have one resume, right? You should have a good solid foundation resume that can be modified based on the job that you're applying for and that you're really demonstrating those skill sets that are specific to that role. So we don't use any type of AI that weeds them out. I read them. I look at them. So I'm going to be looking for those key components or those key attributes that the business unit has identified. So spending some time making sure that your resume is your best reflection of you as it relates to that role you're applying for, to me, really stands out. Um, in terms of connecting the dots with the application and the resume and that we met at the career fair, it's a simple, hey, Kim, email, right? Hey, Kim, we met at USC last week. I just wanted to let you know I applied for ABC. I look forward to the potential of meeting for an interview or meeting with the hiring manager, just connecting the dots. Because I think it was Sherry that said it earlier. We see hundreds of students, right? You've got to help me remember, right? And especially if I don't have a resume with me, you've got to help me remember, and I'm totally okay with that. Just send me a note and let me know.
Yeah, and end of the day, it's really going to come down to job fit. I think the relationship you form with a recruiter is a great, silver lining. It's a great wrapping to yourself. But ultimately the wrapping paper doesn't make the gift, right? And so you can't just go on your relationship alone. You have to make sure that when you apply, you tailor your resume to that job. If there are any supplemental questions, that make sure that you don't just copy and paste for every single job you apply to, right? You say, I'm specialized in this specific function that I'm applying to. I know at least for cover letters, and not that COSM requires a cover letter, but I've seen before where people hand it to me. It might say, Dear Comcast, and I'm like, I'm not Comcast, and so um, just making sure that you are as good in your application as you are in your relationship.
Yeah, and that was a really good metaphor, the wrapping paper and the present. I'm definitely stealing that. But I think, like Kim said, you can send us an email afterwards. Different jobs have like cover letter or statement requirements. We have two statements that we require with the application, and you can put in there, when I met Sherry Momo at the career fair at USC and this time or day, I was really excited about the opportunity. And, the team knows us. So they know, like, oh, that she was at the fair and they met. And so this person is really, really interested in the program. And then I think that question in itself is a great one to ask recruiters when you're sitting and talking with them. Like, I'm so interested in what you do. I've loved learning about your company. What should I be mindful of putting in my resume to help me get the role? There's no like, you don't have to play on hard mode. You can just ask, like, what are you guys looking for? And do you think this experience I have is like makes me a good fit? And I always like giving people tips because I know it takes a lot of bravery to ask a question like that. So
I love all of this good advice. I'm also going to steal that present one. A lot of great metaphors today. So I know we are coming up on time soon, but I want to ask one more question of you all. What is one thing that students in the audience can do today to stand out for next week's recruitment fairs?
Well, I'll go back to what Raleigh said in the very, very beginning, the very first answer. Research the company, see who's going to be at the career fair, look at the map, and pick the ones that you most resonate with. Read about them, read their values, read about what the company's mission statements are. What are they doing? Is it even an industry that you're interested in? Start there and then build your plan. You've got a week. You've got a week to build your plan. So I would start today.
Yeah, again, practice makes perfect. Um, whether that is in looking in your wardrobe and saying, what do I own? Or that is, practicing your elevator pitch or practicing the topics you'd like to cover. A prepared person goes a lot further than somebody who walks in and isn't dressed well and knows nothing about themselves or the company they're applying for.
yeah, you all just got great advice. I think like the common theme is just be very intentional about the time you get with these companies. This might be the first and only time until the interview, if you get an interview with the company, that you get to meet someone face to face and talk about the organization and give a strong first impression of yourself. So be intentional, like Kim mentioned, about where you're going and who they are that you're talking to. Like Raleigh mentioned about what you're wearing and practicing that elevator pitch. It all really, really, really makes a difference. And you're just yourself, but to us, it's like we see so many people that these little things, when we say that they make you stand out, you have to trust us. They really do.
And one more thing I'll throw in there is having courage. I know, confidence doesn't come easy often for a lot of people, especially when you're talking to somebody who maybe could be older than you, or you might feel as though there's a professional gap. Sometimes something I recommend sometimes to people is pretend like you are an actor. And your role is that you are somebody who knows everything about their field of expertise. And so for myself at least, when I was applying for jobs and going to career fairs and doing interviews, I'd tell myself, okay, naturally this is my first job. I don't know a ton about the nitty gritty of laws and policies and all that stuff, but I want to at least pretend to be somebody who is confident enough to learn and have the groundwork for becoming somebody that's very skilled and able to network and grow in the future. So just really, dropping into a character of somebody who is the best version of yourself is something that is super powerful.
I love all of this advice. Thank you so much. It seems like the biggest advice being to research, be confident, right? Be ready for next week. I also wanted to give our panelists a chance to share any sort of like either contact information, opportunities. If you're going to be at next week's fairs, give you all kind of a chance to share that either in the chat or kind of just verbally with our audience as well.
Yeah, I personally will not be at this fair. However, we do have a number of both venue roles. These are the hourly roles that you guys can jump in on. And we also have an internship program that we run. We are going to start recruiting for our summer program later this spring. I can drop the career link in the chat here, but it's pretty simple. It's just Cosm Careers. You'll find that the roles will be literally titled internships. We do have a general interest internship form open on our site right now. So even if you guys have an interest and you don't see it posted just because we're not there yet, you can throw in your name, your area of study, expertise, what you want to do. And when we do start opening up those applications in the spring, we'll actually go through those. And again, we don't use AI, like Kim mentioned. We do them all manually, and we'll start to pull people for and sort them into jobs we think they might be good for. So feel free to apply early or wait and apply later. But know that we do have a number of roles that you guys could jump in on, whether that's an internship or just a hourly position that you want to get some cash for.
Justice Corps is an internship and fellowship program. We place our interns and fellows at courts all over the county. We have a summer internship, an academic year internship, and a full year fellowship that you can apply for, and applications are currently open for all three. Our applications for the summer internship and the fellowship are closing mid-February. Since we're talking about the career fairs, I will be there next week. I'll be there twice next week, actually. I'm really looking forward to it. If you make a really great impression during the career fair and you have a great conversation, I like to keep these people in mind so that similarly, I can pull their applications and review and hopefully interview them if it's a good fit. We also do not use any AI. Our very small team goes through every single application manually. So we encourage you to apply if you're interested in like public interest, serving our members, our neighbors in Los Angeles, and having a really hands-on experience with the law. In the chat, I'll put the link to our website and also my email address. Feel free to send me a message or any questions you might have.
Yeah, and I put my LinkedIn LinkedIn link in the chat. We will not be there next week. We are about wrapped up for 2026. We're about filled. We will be back in the fall, in September, to start for 2027. Those jobs will post in early September, late August, early September.
Thank you. And then, oh, perfect, Rowley. Let me copy and paste that for everybody in the chat. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you for sharing these opportunities. And pro tip, if you do come to the fairs and come talk to Sherry, do tell her you saw her in this panel. I'm sure it'll impress her, right, Sherry? But thank you all for attending today's panel. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights. They have all been at our fairs before. That's why they were invited to be here today. And I'm sure that your insights were very valuable to our students. They're going to be very well prepared next week. So thank you, Raleigh, Sherry, and Kim. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everyone, and happy Career Fest to everyone who's joining us for future events.